recorded, and you'll be able to come back and reference it later. If you choose to join us on screen at some point because you raise your hand, then just keep in mind that your question, your face, if you come online with your face, will be in that recording. But if you, in any case, this is the first session of 2. Today will be an hour. There'll be another hour next week. Is that right, guys? Next week?
That's right.
And both recordings will be available as well. So that's the first thing. The second thing is a couple of little tips on how to optimize your bandwidth. If you get that unstable internet notice that comes across, or if you find yourself being pushed out by the internet, by your Zoom connection, try one of a couple things. First thing is, and this applies anytime you're having unstable internet, is to actually turn off your computer. Don't just restart, but turn off for a few minutes. I'm not suggesting you do that right now, but if in the middle of the meeting you're having trouble, turn off, give yourself 5 minutes off, and you'll find that your connection can be much more stable when you come back. So that's one. And the other thing you might want to try right now, which is to turn off your other programs that are running behind your Zoom meeting, especially your email. So if you sort of slide your Zoom meeting to the side and find your email, just quit the email program, and that'll save you a lot of bandwidth. So those are the first couple of tips. And finally, let's talk about just what to do during this meeting. If you would like to raise your hand, you can do that to ask a question. So raising your hand, there's a little button. You'll look around your screen. Towards the bottom of the screen, there's an option to raise hand. You also have 2 other ways of participating. One is, again, at the bottom of the screen, a little Q&A box. You can type in a question, and Ben or Karen or I will read that question when it comes time for question and answers. You can also chat. So you can chat with me or with Ben or Karen if you're having technical questions, or you want to put your question right into the chat. We'll take it there. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Ben and Karen, and thank you all very much for doing this, and everyone out there for participating.
Thank you, Monica, and thanks for all those tips and reminders. And I just want to say welcome to everyone who is joining us. I can't see you all, but I'm seeing you in my mind's eye. And it's really, really nice to have an opportunity to be with everyone today and to be talking about something that has become so crucial and so important during this crisis and during this time of difficulty for our clients and for us. So, so I thought we would just start with a really quick introduction of myself and also my co-host and colleague, Karen. But I'll say that I'm Ben Medley, and I am coming to you live in this moment from New York City, actually in Jersey City, just outside of New York, in my apartment where I have been working for the past 3 weeks online. I'm an AEDP faculty member, and like I said, really happy to be here with you.
Hi, everybody. I want to join Ben's welcome. I'm really happy to be with you all. And I love the little numbers of participants, because that's a way to imagine there's a lot of you, over 100 out there. And it's just so wonderful to be joined and to share some ideas and work together and, consider what we can do to make this telehealth option as best it can be during this time. So I'm Karen Pando-Mars and AEDP senior faculty. I am coming to you from California, from my San Anselmo home. This is my inside office. We have an outside office and an inside office. And so this is where I am half the week when I'm on the computer like you all.
Mhm.
So I'm just going to share with you our plan for today in this hour that will be going very fast. We want to talk with you about this working online and bridging from being in person to online. And as we've been listening to questions coming in over the listserv, Ben and I got together to really notice how we're thinking about what makes a difference and what what helps connect, or what helps undo aloneness, or what helps with really paying attention to the four states and using that still as a guide as we're online. So we'll be talking with you, sort of setting things up and then working through the four states today and next week. And we'll get as far as we can go today. And then we'll continue next week. And any of the chat questions, if we don't get to them today, we'll pick them up next week. So we are recording this conversation. And as Monica said, if you have questions, we can bring you so that we can see you. And if you don't want to be recorded and have your face shown, then use the chat function so that you can stay in the background that way. And so Monica mentioned raising your hand, using that virtual queue at the bottom of the screen to let us know that you have a question, or the chat function. And we'll want to privilege new voices and new faces each round, although we'll have just a couple of questions probably after each segment, time for a couple of questions. And I'd like to just ask you to take a moment as you're arriving here to feel your feet on the floor, take a breath, and I want to ask you to think about what the shift for you has been like from going in person to online. Just a few weeks ago, most of us were sanitizing our offices, asking people to wash hands frequently, paying attention to, I don't know about you, but I was opening and closing doors for people as much as I could. And then the day came when that became too much of a risk and we moved to online, to telehealth. So just see if you can take a moment to remember what that transition was like for you. And just feel what you notice in your body as you remember that change, how you felt about the idea of seeing your clients on your computer all day long and what that means to you. Being in your home, seeing your clients in their homes, and just remember that shift. And then notice what's happening in your body as you remember this. And then just let that be in the background. And now Ben's going to begin by sharing with you ideas about making optimal use of the online work. So Ben, over to you.
Great, thanks, Karen. So I wanted to talk a little bit about setting up space and creating connection, or as a client said to me this past week, setting up the office, creating the office that we have online together and the space that we share there. Most of the time, this is starting with some kind of message that's shared and inviting the client to come online. So what I mean is usually an email saying, I'm moving online, we'll be working in this way from now on, inviting the client to come in. And I wanted to mention that because I think one important thing from the get-go is privileging the positive. That as we're inviting clients to come in, that we're expressing a positive message of possibility in terms of our online work. So one of the things that I've been doing is just letting clients know from the get-go that I have found online work to be very effective, and that although I may prefer to be in person with someone, that I feel very good about the possibilities of work that we can do online and the potential for change and transformation. And I make that really explicit in an email inviting clients to come online with me. Then once we get online and we're meeting for the first time, I think it's really, really important. Karen and I talked about this for quite a bit the first time we met to discuss the importance of establishing space. So there's several things that I'll mention to a client when we first get online. Is one, I want to make sure that I can see my client well. And so if my client's face is darkened, then I will ask if it's possible to turn towards some light or turn a light on in the room, something like this, so that I have the client more in view. And of course, on the other side of that, also making sure that I can be seen and that I'm facing the light. You may notice that right now as I'm talking, the lighting's pretty good in terms of how I appear. I am facing two windows. I have a light to my left-hand side, and I have a light overhead that's on to make sure that I have the optimal light. I think of it kind of like when I'm watching a movie, that I want to see the actor's face clearly so that I can track what's being felt and what's happening inside of the actor. And although we're not acting while we're online with our clients, I want my client to be able to see shifts in my face and track what's happening in me, as well as being able to track these things in my client. Also, I'm inquiring about where my clients are. So I'm asking, where are you at this time? What room are you in? And also asking about privacy. How much privacy does my client have in the space that they are in? Is it possible for other people to hear? Are there other people in a shared space? I'm working with a lot of people in New York City. As many of you know, we have very small spaces here, and I know that's true in other cities too. And sometimes there's roommates and things like this. So it's an important question about how much privacy do you have, so that we can know that and also address how to establish more privacy. Is it possible to have a space that is more private? Can we move there? Also sound privacy. One of the things that one of my clients taught me actually was that on the phone, you can find an app to make white noise. So most of the time this is a sleep app, but if you go onto the App Store, look for white noise, there are free applications there that will make a sound machine noise that many of us have outside of our doors at our offices, and clients can set them outside the door of whatever space they may be in to create more sound privacy. So those are some of the things to set up privacy. Also, I ask clients, you may notice that as I'm talking now in the webinar that I have my computer on a print cartridge box and let's see, 6 books. The reason why is that I've raised my computer to be at eye level. So I ask my clients if it's possible to be seated somewhere. It's not always possible. Sometimes people are in a bedroom and sitting on a bed. Is it possible to be seated as if they're in my office? And can we get the computer at eye level? I realize I'm saying computer, so one of the other things is I ask my clients if they're working from a computer or phone. Usually that's visually very apparent on the platform I use, which is Zoom. But if they have a computer available and not just a phone, then I will ask if it's possible to meet on the computer. The reason being is that there's a larger screen and it gives more of a sense of the person being with me and me being with the person. So working from a computer is possible, setting up at eye level, facing the light, also being clear about turning off phones, turning off notifications on computers. You notice that I'm wearing earphones. I suggest people wear earphones so that they can hear better. Also to create even more sound privacy, that's a possibility. I have had people have calls come through their computer and text messages that are coming through the computer. asking people to turn these off so that we're minimizing distractions and disruptions. And of course, making sure that we do that on our end as well, so that we're not distracted by these things as we go. Keeping in mind that we're all adjusting. This is an imperfect process, and we may learn some of these things or realize that it's on as we go. Yes, Karen.
Well, I'm just remembering one of the things we talked about is just like in the office, we're practicing attunement to each other and working through disruptions. As these beginning sessions happen with disruptions, I've noticed how helpful it is to be explicit with people that we're getting used to this new medium. And sometimes people get really frustrated that, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, and I say, it's okay. Just regulate this. We're learning. And it's like we're attuning to this new forum, like we're attuning to each other.
Exactly.
And so just to make it part of the setting up our space it's just part of the getting used to a new way of being with each other.
Yes. Yeah. As we'll be talking more about as we go, the importance of making the implicit explicit and the need to do that mindfully as we work online. And you're pointing out an aspect of that is being explicit about making this adjustment together and changing the format in which we are meeting with our clients. Also, in terms of establishing connection, just taking a moment with our clients as we begin, once we've got everything set up, to make eye contact. If our clients are comfortable with that, of course, we're starting where our clients are. And taking a moment to ground, to get our feet on the ground, to take a breath, just as we did, as Karen, you led us through as we were starting, just taking a moment to establish some connection, asking about how people are, maybe even using a meditation at the beginning to guide people, ground them, and taking a breath together. Did you have something to add to that, Karen?
I just noticed that someone said the sound of our voices was coming in and out, so I just wanted to ask Monica about that. And
Okay.
Responded, I think it's okay. I think that's on that person's end.
okay, and then the other thing was about how to turn off text, and I wondered if you had a quick way to tell people how to do that then.
I can tell you that each person has to actually look into that on their own, because it depends a little bit on what their setup is. But it's very easy to just Google, how do I stop the texts coming across my screen? And then it will ask you a few things about, are you on a Mac? Are you on a PC? What programs do you have? Are you tied into your phone, etc. like that. So it's very individual, but it's also not hard.
Okay, thanks, Monica.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of times when you're first setting up your computer and you're going through the setup process, it happens, you first turn it on there and sync everything up. And so it can be a little confusing. But if you Google, confusing when you're trying to turn things off and how did this even happen in the first place? So if you Google that, then you should be able to find the answer for whatever kind of computer or iPad or tablet that you're using to turn that off. So I just want to take a minute again to, just like I'm saying, just establish some connection together, connection to each other, connection to ourselves. Just to notice where we are now in this process. Taking a moment to tune in to our bodies, to our experience. Just notice what shifts or what stays the same. What gets stronger. what gets lesser. And just notice that. Yeah. As Karen said earlier, just holding on to this information for tracking as we go, for paying attention to what happens inside of us as we work together online. Great. So Karen, back over to you.
Okay. Did you want to check in about any comments, questions, one or two right now?
Oh yeah, thank you. Great idea. I see that someone's raised their hand.
So the first question was from Tom Berdensky. I don't know if are you going to be addressing that, Karen?
And I let him know we'll talk about
Great.
that.
And then the last one was just this issue of, from Julie, looking at the screen as opposed to looking at camera, tricky. And we also have one raised hand from Susan Brenner whenever you're ready. Susan,
Okay.
I guess, would like to come on screen. Oh, Susan dropped her hand. I guess her question was answered.
Okay.
Julie.
So I'll say something about Julie's comment that, thank you, Julie, that it is tricky. And I just want to, what I do, I'll speak to that, is that I, because it's helpful for me, once I've established the space and we're both working at eye level, if that's possible, it's not always possible, but if it is, then I'm looking in the eyes of the client. It's helpful for me to feel that sense of working. And I've positioned the person so that it's just below my camera. So right now I can actually see Karen on my screen, and I'm looking at Karen, and yet it also gives a little bit of an illusion of looking directly. And so that's what I choose to do. I know that some people like working, looking at the camera. I'm looking at it now. There's a slight difference in the eyes, if you can see the eyes clearly. But for me, because I'm tracking and using the moment-to-moment tracking and looking for subtleties, because Karen's going to talk more about this, but we're working with a smaller visual. It's really helpful for me to keep my eyes on the client. But I've just positioned my computer so that when I'm doing that, my eyes are still on the level of the camera.
And what I will add, I appreciate what you're saying, Ben, like having the camera set up so that as close as possible, we're able to keep eye contact with each other and the sense of that.
Yes.
Every once in a while, I've had someone actually ask me to look into the camera for that extra regulation of really being able to feel that extra dose of seeing me, seeing them. And for me, it's a bit of a in service of them, because when I'm really focused in the light of the camera, I'm seeing them peripherally, but I hear them say like, oh, thank you so much, or oh, that feels better. And that, you know, is an adjustment that I'm totally willing to make in order to add that bit of regulation when it's needed.
Yeah. Thanks, Karen. And again, in the service of making implicit explicit, when in doubt, ask.
Yes.
Right? That because yes, a client may need us to look directly into the camera or may feel us more when we do that. And so just making that process explicit and being inquisitive about that with our clients, it's really important.
It reminds me of one of the through lines of bringing meta processing in all the way through. We have this wanting to know how things are going, what this is like, our small M's during a during a session when somebody makes a shift and we want to find out how that is. I apply that to if we're making a technical shift, how is this now? So that we continue to fine tune. You know, I have clients, you know, checking out the different seating possibilities in my office. Sometimes we're checking out the different seating possibilities at home, or the different ways of what's the right like amount of visual, how much space on top of my head. You know, someone said the other day, like, oh no, I need like a space above your head, otherwise it's too weird. Or so just that fine tuning and making the space to help whatever feels comfortable to
Yes.
be as best as it can be.
Yeah, and that's on both sides of the equation. I see some questions that are coming in about this, about how do you position people. That I make it explicit about, I'm having trouble seeing your face right now. Can we make this adjustment? Is it possible to move the screen up or down so that I have more of a sense, right? Just, it's okay to, I feel it's okay to make that explicit. And it's also communicating that it's important to us that we see and feel our clients. So making those adjustments explicit, I think, are important.
I see a question, Ben, here about how do we make the implicit explicit when there are problems with the internet connection? My face freezes for them, or their face freezes, audio issues. And then there's turning away to look at phones or cats come by. I think that's slightly different.
Yeah, do you want to say something about that?
Well, I'm just thinking this is part and parcel of what I've been dealing with the last couple of weeks, that some of my clients who live in more remote areas and have an unstable internet connection, we've gone back and forth between FaceTime and Zoom, or we keep an image and use our cell phones so that our voices are constant while our images may not be. And so I find just being creative with the options. One person I worked with went to her car and drove into town because it was better internet in town, and either used her phone or a hotspot. So again, it's like checking out what's going to work and help with that. And then about when people are turning away to look at phone or cats, then I think we're in the realm of defense work, which I'll be going into in a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's see, asking them to change.
So, and I think just to add to what you're saying is that I've also switched to just a normal phone call during sessions because the technical problems were so great. So, and then just being really explicit about the technical issues and the problems, and inquiring and meta-processing what the experience is like to be experiencing these technical difficulties and switching, and so that we're not just trying to act as if it's not happening and get through it as quick as possible, but to actually make it part of the process and meta-process what that's like.
I just see a question about glare and glasses. And I'm remembering the other day, I actually took my glasses off because my patient was so disturbed by the glare. There was a white light that was captured in my glasses that we couldn't find a way around it. And at a point I said, okay, I'm going to take my glasses off and see how it goes. And she said, well, are you going to be able to see me? I said, let me see. And it seemed like the balance was helpful for her to have me without the glare and my good enough vision for the time. So again, it's like there's some adjustments and fine tuning that's client by client, moment by moment, what we can do.
Exactly.
And then the very last question is about positioning the camera, what to do when you are recording the session in Zoom. To get a recording of the patient all of the time, you need to have gallery view, which ends up with the patient in a window and me in another one. So the patient is in a window off the center. This is what we were talking about a minute ago. Ben, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so what I have done is, instead of making the Zoom window full screen, I've kept it at a reduced size and then moved the window over so that my client is center in the screen and I am very off to the side. So that, and I'll position the window my client's in center to the screen and up towards the camera so that, again, when I'm looking at my client's face, it's as aligned with the camera as possible. So that's what I'm doing when it's if I'm doing gallery view to compensate for, uh, looking over to the side if it's on gallery view, just bringing it more central so I don't use the full screen.
That seems really helpful. I just registered that right now. Thanks. So it's interesting, right? We talked about this earlier, but hearing something and then hearing it again, like there really is something about repetition. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
Do you want to move into the next?
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Karen.
So the next part is starting to work using the phenomenology of the four states, so AEDP's model, to actually look at what's different and what's the same in how we're using our maps, the triangles and the four states. And so one of the first places that occurs to me is when clients might say, well, I'm actually not really comfortable going online, and when to treat this as a defense and when to treat this as a real issue and real problem. I have had two examples of this. One person said, I just can't talk about myself when the world is in such a crisis right now. And I actually respected that. I've worked with a long time with her and I kind of know what she means. And then I responded and I said, and I just want you to know, I really find these sessions to be quite meaningful and powerful and deep. So if you do get to a place where you want to try this, I'm here. So just, let's touch base. And she said, well, let's be in touch. And then wrote me an email and said, okay, I am going to try it. I talked to my partner about Zoom and it looks like I know that I'll be able to use that if I need to. And so it was the back and forth that allowed us to kind of parse out where's the defense, where's the uncertainty, where is that playing out the larger uncertainty, and how do I accommodate and adapt to something new. So that's the sort of approaching online. And then there might be somebody coming in and saying, like, I just don't like this. You're two-dimensional and I'm used to you being three-dimensional. And what I want to do there is I want to find out in this moment, how am I actually seeming to you? Because again, I'm trying to look at what are the ideas I'm bringing in. I'm not going to like this. And what's actually happening right now. Because sometimes in the moment, someone might realize, like, actually, you know what? Having contact with you is worth some of the discomfort of seeing you from heads and shoulders up. Or I miss being in your office. I miss the familiar container that we make there. And so again, I'm trying to work with what's needing to adapt to this new form, what's hesitancy, and what's like figuring something out and going into the moment. How is this now? What's happening here? Sometimes drops the discomfort of the platform into so much has changed in my life in these last 3 weeks. I can't even believe it. And boom, then we're dropped down into this isn't the biggest discomfort, actually. There's so much uncertainty in this time, and there's so much loss. And now there's also I think many of our lives are starting to be touched, like, oh, I know someone, I'm, as a therapist, I'm holding my clients, I'm holding the awareness of this world pandemic. I'm aware of people in my life who are ill and I'm concerned about. And so there's this graduating concern. And so I'm really wanting to tune into where people are coming in that might be hard to talk about and to make room for and become overwhelming, and just try to normalize the time that we're in. So I guess just the bottom line is to just kind of get into the moment to moment, because often, like any of the surface defenses, once we start hearing, there's layers of what's underneath that we can be addressing. And then the other thing is, I like to notice when someone makes a shift. I like to pay attention to, we're looking for transformance. When someone makes a shift and says, oh, you know what, I'm actually really glad because I want to tell you something here. Like, thank you. I just appreciate your making use of this time right now. So we can treat that as transformance, or a glimmer of, maybe some tears form. It's like, this is so hard. And I see tears, right? There's this sense of how to keep using our moment to moment tracking to notice when shifts happen. There might be, it's like, I find it, there's a balance between my authentic, I'm in this with you, and how to join, we're in this together under the aloneness, but be judicious about that so that we're also available for the, once joined, the dropping down can start to happen, right? And then often as the dropping down happens, anxiety kicks in, and so I'm thinking of someone the other day who is over 65, has heart conditions, and does the kind of work, that contract work, that everything stopped. And he started talking to me about, how unnerved he is and how stressed he is, and not quite able to name feelings. And yet in the process, as I use my empathic elaborating, giving words to the feelings, I could see him start to settle a bit. And then I use really practical anxiety regulation in, let's pay attention to what's in your control and what's not in your control. As you're fretting about the work that isn't possible to do right now, what can be done about that? He said, and then my kids took so much time away today. I spent hours with them on the phone. And what was that like? Turns out that was really meaningful. And so we started re-privileging what this time might need. And by, as time went on in the session, there was this re-privileging, oh, this contact with kids feels really important right now. I'm being a stabilizing base for them, but I'm used to being a provider and doing my work. Okay, but maybe when things change, I'll be able to do that again. But for right now, so I worked with him on gratitudes and noticing, and throughout the session, we picked up things as he was saying that he was grateful for. But I helped him in a different way than I usually do, like, oh, note that one down. That's something to be grateful for. And then at the end of the day, I got a note for him, and he said, thank you so much for that session. I'm learning new words. I feel more centered. And, I just love the opportunity to shift to what felt very concrete and practical for this particular anxiety regulation. For someone else, I might say, well, someone else is saying, oh, I don't see you in the whole screen. Someone asked a question earlier, what do you do when I only see, neck and shoulders or chest up? And I've invited my clients to notice that I still want to know what's happening in their bodies, and I may only be able to see them partially, but I really want them to notice their bodies and let me know if there's something that I may not see that they're picking up. And last night, someone said, oh, you know what? My hands are going like this right now as I'm talking to you. I was like, oh, thank you for telling me. Like, what might those hands be saying right now? Or as we're starting to have some feelings, he says, actually, I'm doodling over here so I can distract myself. Thank you for telling me. So the specific invitation to tell me what's going on that might be significant, that if I were in the office, if we were in the office together, I would see. Again, I find it so moving to have that invitation received, and for this, for this person to take me up on that. Go, Ben.
Yeah, I'm raising my hand.
I love it.
I just to build on what you're saying, one of the things that I've been very aware of doing online work is just as you can see this much of my body, that I am tracking this much of the body very closely.
Mm-hmm.
And so anytime I see subtle movements, I might start to get curious about that in a way that maybe I wouldn't have just in my office, because I have more information with the entire body in sight. Because these little things can mean that an arm is below screen, moving up and down, or a leg is tapping if I see a little bounce in the part that I can see. And so being really curious about these subtle movements that in the body of what in the visual that I can see. And I found that to be very useful.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I'm aware of my reliance on the auditory as well. And so I might actually hear something coming through of tapping or something like this. And I've been inquisitive about, oh, I'm hearing a sound and I'm curious what's happening right now. And I might get an answer of, oh, I'm tapping the desk, or, oh, okay, what's happening in your hand? What's happening inside? So relying on both the visual in a different way and also relying on those auditory cues in a different way. I just wanted to add that to what you're saying, in addition to being explicit about asking about parts that can't be seen.
I love that, because it's like continuing to hone in our moment-to-moment tracking, and to making the implicit explicit. Somebody asked a question on the listserv about the relying on the auditory and the visual so much, and I remember here one time I was working with someone who said, "I've heard you have a really strong presence, but I don't feel that so much right now."
Mm-hmm.
And I realize that there's an energetic presence that I am aware in sessions, that there's this sort of field that gets created between us. And so how to make more explicit, so that we can utilize these other channels of experience, of like, as I'm asking, I'm seeing and I'm hearing, but I might want to know what someone's imagining, or if you have an image right now, or help me to know, what's your energy like in your body, what can you describe to me about your presence. And so sometimes I might notice that my hand just naturally goes to my chest, or I start rocking, and I might just notice, like, are you aware of this, like, moving towards, or our hands both went to our chest at the same time. Did you see that? Are you noticing that? So something to bring in the attunement of our bodies that happens, and making that explicit. There was one question that came up, I noticed someplace, about, I as therapists don't like to see my image on screen. I just want to see the clients. And Ben and I were talking about that, because there's something about being able to see and utilize the feedback of my image, so that I can see how I'm coming across, so that I can see if I moved and I put my hand on my chest and leaned forward, is the client getting that visual? Or if my screen is just like this, maybe I'm putting my hand here, but they can't tell. And so if I can adjust my screen so that I can show, more of, what might move and how I might offer that, that's useful, I think, to continuing to build that right brain to right brain connection.
And I find myself making adjustments also as I'm watching myself that here's where I put my hand. So you can see 2 fingers in that. So I can adjust the screen. I can also move back. But another thing I can do is just make sure I move my hand up,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's a little above where I might naturally put it, but I want to make sure that that visual is coming across of holding my hand here as we're working
Mm-hmm.
together.
Yeah.
Someone had commented asking Karen if you were holding your hands higher as you were presenting now.
Oh,
And
right here.
in terms of the visual, holding your hands higher so that they appear in the field of view better.
At the moment, I'm how I am.
Mm-hmm.
My screen is, this is where I would put my hand on my heart, and it happens to work at this distance.
Mm-hmm.
So um,
Great.
I wanted to just also notice, breath. I just, again, just noticing when clients are taking a breath or I'm taking a breath, I might make that explicit. Like, I just took a really deep breath right now. Just to continue to include the nonverbals as much as possible and to see where that leads. And I think what I want to do right now is just also show how I might do a guided practice to help someone slow down. Like when the person I was working with found that this was two-dimensional and I don't know if I'm going to be able to reach you, I said, well, let's just take a minute. She said, I can't go into my body. I'm not good at that. That's why I'm seeing you. And okay, I get that. So let me help you right now. Let me guide you. So I'm just going to practice for a minute just to see what it feels like for you to actually do a guided practice online. So I might just say, let your eyes stay open or closed, soft focus, or let your attention go inside. And if you just feel your feet on the floor and notice if you can let the gravity, the weight of your feet really touch the floor so you can feel support. And feel yourself sitting in your chair and let yourself feel your seat, feel your bottom in the chair, and feel your back against the chair so that you're really supported. So just let yourself feel the support of your back, the chair, your seat. Feel how your legs move out from your hips and fold at your knees and move down to your feet on the floor. And then just notice your breath without changing it at first, just noticing how you feel your breath. And if you like, you can just let a little sound out as you exhale. You might feel your heartbeat as you slow down and feel your breath, and just let yourself notice that. Notice what else comes more into the foreground as you listen and feel into your body. And take another breath, and this time let your exhale extend a little longer. And just one more. Take one more breath. Just take a moment and scan your body and see if you notice any place that's holding, that needs attention. Just let your attention go to that place. And now just feel your feet on the floor, feel your whole body, feel your breathing. Just see if a word or an image comes to you about how you are right now. And then when you feel ready, just let yourself come back. Come back into this moment, into this webinar. Imagining your client into the room together. And sometimes with a client, I might actually ask for a number of where on a scale of 1 to 10, how stressed or calm they feel. And then after that, notice how stressed or calm they feel. And just sort of to use a number measure so that there's a sense of noticing shifts. So I think we'll take a pause here if there's another question or two and just take it from here.
There was one about a few minutes ago from Marilyn. It was a while ago. Do you sometimes make the window of tolerance smaller? Do you see that one, guys? To avoid overshooting it and to protect against the client becoming overwhelmed when they are home alone?
I'm interested in make the window of tolerance smaller. I'm not sure if I get the wording because I'm wanting to notice the window of tolerance. And so, you know, working with my clients to find out where they are and, you know, like I told you with the person I was working with in the beginning, to get very concrete and practical to sort of help him manage things. So I think being aware of the window of tolerance is super important. And I don't know if something else occurs to you with this question.
Yeah, I was taking a moment to think about the wording of that too. And I think as you're speaking in a similar vein, what I think is very important, and we'll talk about this as we talk more about state 2 work online, is tracking very closely for when people are exiting a window of tolerance, and when we're in the window of tolerance. And there are some real differences, of course, in being in 2 separate rooms and working through a computer, in terms of how we help people when they exit that window of tolerance, which we'll talk more about. But to answer the question in a simple form, I think what we're saying is that we're being very mindful and tracking moment to moment to be very mindful of when people might start to exit that, especially as people are holding so much right now. That, you know, Karen, as you said, not only the so much uncertainty, we're dealing with impact of measures to contain the virus, as well as impacts of the virus. More, I certainly know for myself, I know many people who have tested positive, who have gotten sick for the virus, and that has been increasing as I go through this process in New York, and also our clients being sick, and so really being tracking closely, being mindful, and as we keep saying, making the implicit explicit and inquiring about what is happening. Really important.
And I'm also thinking, Ben, there's also working with our model. I have somebody who shares something new with me and then starts talking very quickly about how she can't change. And I'm doing my, oh, did you notice you just opened something up? And then so quickly you're telling me how you can't change. And if only you could achieve something. And I just want to say the sharing you just did is achieving something, right? And so I'm still, you know, noticing how someone's moving away from experience is also part and parcel of what we're tracking in AEDP. That's a very natural part of the process of opening up, is getting anxious and moving away. So we're regulating, and we're also teaching how to notice, isn't this interesting how doing something new brings up, I can't. Right. So there's just that practical part of our model that happens too. So I just want to notice it's 5 minutes to 11, Ben. So
yes. Time is flying. Yes. And
take another question, or do you guys want to continue for the last 5? Whatever you prefer.
That's a good question. I think what we could do, Karen, is just say a little bit about some state 2 work,
Mhm.
And then of course we'll pick that up the next week,
Mhm.
diving into that more fully. And it just seems like a natural progression from the last question,
Mhm.
that one of the things tied into making the implicit explicit when we're doing that state 2 work of dyadic regulation of affect is, one of the differences is not being in the room, that it's, I might lean towards my client or move towards my client. And I still do that as I'm working online. And so I will lean forward. And it's, again, I'm looking at my visual because I don't want to get too close
Roomy.
where, right, where it becomes overwhelming. But I will lean forward a little bit, and then I'll make it explicit. I don't know if you notice, but I just move forward, right? Do you have a sense of that? Or if I move my chair forward and I'm not necessarily leaning, I just moved closer to you. And this is one of the things that I want to call attention to, is the language I just used. I just moved closer to you.
Mhm.
That I'm not saying I just moved closer to the computer. I
Mhm.
just moved closer to you,
Mhm.
right? And making this explicit in case it gets missed, because if a client looks away from the screen for a moment, they may not see it. And whereas in a room, when I'm in the space, you may have more of a sense of my moving towards you, even if you're not looking directly at me. So making that more explicit
Mhm.
as we do that. And then asking explicitly, I know that you're there and I'm here, but can you feel me with you?
Mhm.
Can you feel, there might be a self-disclosure in there too. Can
Mhm.
you feel the care and concern that I have for you right now?
Mhm.
Right? Making, explicitly asking. And also, if the client is looking away, asking, would it be okay, asking permission, would it be okay to take a look at the screen? Can you see me? Can you see?
Mhm.
What do you see? Right? One of my favorite things to ask. What do you see right now?
Mhm.
Really making that explicit, more so because we're on camera.
Ben, I realize there's one thing I want to say that actually might tap into that old other question. You and I
Mm-hmm.
talked about this, is I'm still tracking glimmers and wanting to make space for emotional experience. And like
Yes.
Ben is saying, bringing ourselves so that we're accompanying relationally and explicitly the person. But so often, the emotions aren't fully processed, that as ever, and there's so many emotions in the air right now. I want to make it safe for my clients to realize that they can feel their emotions even in their own home, and that I'm still here with them to go through those emotions. And then of course we're going to meta process the relationship and also the experience, so
Mm-hmm.
that they can realize, like, oh, I was so afraid I was going to get overwhelmed, but the truth is I feel lighter, or I feel some relief, or I'm so glad I let you know this. Right? So that just because we're online, I find that most of the time, with my careful moment-to-moment tracking, relational accompaniment, anxiety regulation, that I'm still wanting to make space for processing emotion.
Yes. So I'm so aware we're at the end of our time together. We are going to talk much more about state 2 work online when we meet next week at the same time. We have the questions that have been asked, so we'll be taking a look at those. So if you have any more questions, feel free to add those to the chat, the Q&A. And we'll start by addressing some of the questions. We'll dive into some more state 2 and talk about state 3 and state 4 as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Karen and Monica, for holding the space together.
And thank you, Ben and Monica. And it's just been a joy, and I really look forward to seeing how this is for you, or we look forward to hearing how this is for you next week too, and look forward to hearing and seeing you then.
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks, you guys.
Bye, everyone. See you next week, I
Bye.
hope.
Yes, as best we can.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, so many thank yous popping up.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Oh, good.
yeah.
Thank you. It's part of our larger community, working together, inspiring together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, wow, that was a lot. There's so much possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm.